Marist College for YNN's special presentation of a debate between Republican Congresswoman Nan Hayworth and her challenger, Democrat Sean Patrick Maloney, in New York's newly drawn 18th Congressional District. I'm Liz Benjamin.
And I'm Nick Reisman. The new district includes all of Orange and Putnam counties, as well as parts of Dutchess County and Westchester County. This will be an hour-long debate. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer questions, followed by a 45-second rebuttal from their opponent. Also, 30 seconds will be allotted to the candidates at our discretion.
During the debate, the candidates will also be allowed to ask one question of each other. We will have a lightning round, which is everyone's favorite, where the candidates will only be able to respond with yes or no answers. We start tonight with 1 minute opening statements, and I believe, Congresswoman, you will be going first.
Well, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Liz. Thanks to YNN for hosting this debate, and it is wonderful to be back at Marist College in Hancock Center. President Murray, you've done a magnificent job with the college. It's great to see our students here, and of course, go Red Foxes. This is a great night for the Hudson Valley. We have much to accomplish together. This election is about character. It is about the character of our Hudson Valley, and it's about the character of the two candidates you see before you. My opponent claims to have lived in the Hudson Valley, claims to have been one of us, but in fact, I have very deep roots here in the Hudson Valley. For 24 years, I have lived here, I have worked here, I've cared for patients here, I've raised a family here. And I hope to demonstrate to you in the next hour that when it comes to issues regarding the Hudson Valley, I have been here for our constituents, listening, learning, and carrying those thoughts and those lessons and those priorities, those roots, back to Washington to provide the best possible service as the representative for the Hudson Valley. Thank you.
Congresswoman, thank you. Mr. Maloney.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Marist College, and thank you, YNN. Folks, this race is a choice. It's a choice about the future, and the choice is between a Bill Clinton job creator and a Tea Party Republican. 2 years ago, Congresswoman Hayworth was swept into Washington with the Tea Party. And what did she do? What were her priorities? We now know. Her #1 priority was to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare, to give huge tax cuts to multimillionaires like her own family, to kill Planned Parenthood, to take away all of its federal funding. I think those are the wrong priorities. She would cut veterans benefits. She would cut Pell Grants for kids trying to get through college. These are the wrong priorities for the Hudson Valley. Look, I'm a Bill Clinton Democrat. I worked on the White House senior staff. I came back, built my own business, and created hundreds of good jobs right here in New York. If you give me your voice and your vote, I will go down to Washington and fight for working and middle-class families every single day. And we can turn the page on the Tea Party.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Clearly, you guys are ready to mix it up. I'd like to talk about something that I know that the voters are very concerned about, and it's the economy. So what we have here is a newly drawn district that is very diverse and presents a unique set of challenges. It's an area that now has some urban centers that are economically depressed and also have as high unemployment, and then some wealthier suburban areas where residents are very burdened with high property taxes. So this first question to you, Congresswoman, it's the same question to both of you. What do you believe can be done to the single most important thing to strengthen the district economically as a whole, and how do you plan to achieve it?
Well, Liz, I have had the privilege of talking with our farmers in Pine Island, with our urban pastors here in Poughkeepsie, with leaders in the Latino community just last weekend at Latinos Unidos. And they all have the same concern. We need a climate in the United States that will allow, and here in the Hudson Valley, that will allow our businesses to grow, whether they be our family farms or our small businesses throughout our towns like Warwick and where I've visited with the Chamber, throughout the Hudson Valley and here in Poughkeepsie. The best way to do that, of course, is to provide for the climate by reducing taxes, reducing crushing regulations and red tape, and lowering energy prices. In the House of Representatives, we have worked steadily to do all of those things with the cooperation of Democrats and Republicans alike. And this is a crucial issue for our Hudson Valley. Having that understanding of the fact that these are people who are burdened with some of the highest property taxes in the nation and yet still have to struggle to get our small businesses to grow.
Mr. Maloney?
Well, yes, you need a good climate. You also need a champion. You know, I talked to a man named Jim Taylor. He's running a business called Taylor Biomass in Montgomery, New York. It's just outside Newburgh. You know, he's a Republican, and he wants to create 20 megawatts of renewable power right here in Orange County. He'll create 300 good jobs, union jobs, good wages. You can support a family on them. And in a place in the Hudson Valley where we really need jobs. Unfortunately, the Congresswoman has not helped Mr. Taylor. In fact, every other Republican elected official in Orange County supports this project, the state assemblywoman, the Republican state senator, the county executive. But Jim Taylor said, quote, she's killing us. She's killing small business because she's been running down the project and she won't support the help he needs from a federal partner. That's wrong. If you give me your vote, I'll go to Washington and fight to create jobs right here in the Hudson Valley.
Congresswoman.
In fact, I have done nothing but wish Jim Taylor well. I know Jim. He's a great leader in Orange County, and I certainly want to see his project thrive. It would be a wonderful thing if it did for the county and for the Hudson Valley. In fact, when there was a problem with the delay in the application, I was able, even though right now Taylor Biomass is not in the district, I was able to help resolve that deadline so that they could continue their application to the Department of Energy. In fact, the obstruction to Mr. Taylor's project is not Nan Hayworth, but it is the Department of Energy.
Congresswoman Hayworth, you took office, I'm sorry, Mr. Maloney, actually, this is going to you. Where would you say the Obama administration and Washington, D.C. in general has fallen short in job creation over the last 4 years, and what would you like to see done differently if elected? Well,
look, we can't do enough on job creation, and I'm not going to rest until every family, every person in the Hudson Valley who wants a job can find one. Now, I worked with President Clinton for years on the White House senior staff, so we created 23 million new jobs across America. We created almost 1 million jobs right here in New York, and I came back from Washington and I started my own business. I've met a payroll. I know how hard it is in a difficult environment. I've done it. And we created hundreds of good jobs right here in New York. So I've created jobs in the private sector. I've created jobs in the public sector. But, you know, the Congresswoman told the Journal News she thinks government should stop, quote, stop trying to create jobs, because that's this Tea Party ideology that says that government has no role to play. Look, the government will never be the answer to all of our job creation needs. It's not even the number one mover. The private sector will always be the energy behind our economy, but the government has a role to play.
Congresswoman?
Well, in fact, I've had 24 years of living here in the Hudson Valley, and during that time, 7 of those years were spent growing my own small practice from scratch, and I understand very well how challenging it can be to establish and grow a business here in the Hudson Valley. It should not be that difficult. It should be much easier. We need a national climate that will support our small businesses and our larger ones and enable them to grow and invest and hire right here. We have to make our tax code flatter and fairer. We have to reduce regulatory burdens. We have an avalanche of red tape coming out of Washington right now. We need to have energy that we can afford. We need to activate domestic energy. President Clinton was a very sensible man in working with a Republican Congress, and he did that before Mr. Maloney's service with him. And I commend President Clinton for that, but Mr. Maloney is a Pelosi Democrat on these issues, not a Clinton Democrat.
Mr. Maloney, if you want to respond to that.
Well, that's a Tea Party talking point. It has no bearing on the truth. I've actually worked for President Clinton since 1992. And I believe if you look from 1993 to 2000, that's when the Clinton administration passed the budget in 1993, with all due respect, Congresswoman, before the Republicans took over the Congress. We passed the budget in 1993 without a single Republican vote and created 23 million new jobs. Look, here's the point. The point is that we can do this, but we've got to start working together. And it's time to turn the page on the divisive, broken politics of the Tea Party. And that's what's at stake in this election.
Okay, so now we've heard a lot about President Clinton. I do want to talk about another Democrat, Chuck Schumer. So, Congresswoman, this goes to you. I'm sure that you've probably heard the senior senator recently threw a bit of a wrench into the bipartisan deficit reduction talks by sort of rejecting the tax reform overhaul that would lower tax rates for the rich while generating more income was the idea. He wants to freeze the top 2 income rates, and also he wants to start talking about entitlement cuts, not specifics at this point. What's your position on what he said just recently? And if you disagree, what's your proposal for a deal that actually does manage to reduce the deficit but also holds middle-class taxpayers harmless?
Higher taxes kill jobs. It is just that simple. Higher taxes. We have the highest taxes on businesses, small and large, in the developed world, which is why working capital is moving out of the United States, which is why we have, one of the major reasons we have such trouble establishing and keeping businesses in the United States, including here in the Hudson Valley. And I certainly commend Governor Cuomo for working very sensibly to move New York State into a far better fiscal position, better fiscal management of our state government, because that's the kind of approach that we need from the federal level. And certainly the answer is not, as Governor Cuomo knew, he refused a millionaire's tax, and that was wise. There is no such thing as increasing taxes, creating more jobs. We need to simplify our tax code. We need to reduce those basic burdens on our small businesses. We need to simplify regulations, and we need to reduce domestic energy costs. And we have done all of those things with Democrats and Republicans working together in the House of Representatives.
So just to be clear, there is no scenario in which you could see yourself supporting any increase on top earners.
What we need to do is assure that all the dollars that can flow into the productive economy do just that. We are facing a tax cliff come January that will create crushing burdens on our middle class and working families. These folks get caught up in those burdens. If we don't extend the 01 and 03 structures now, we will face tremendous burdens and tax increases across the board. That is not the approach that we need to take. We need to provide relief. We need to provide growth. We need to provide jobs for the 23 million Americans who are underemployed or unemployed.
So no, then.
No.
Right? No. Okay. Mr. Maloney.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, Liz. You know, it's hard to represent the community when you misrepresent the facts. The fact of the matter is that Governor Cuomo and the Tea Party Congresswoman have absolutely nothing in common. The fact of the matter is, under the Cuomo plan, multimillionaires are paying a little more than they used to, and it's a balanced approach that was passed with the Republicans in the New York State Senate, who are doing things that the Tea Party Republicans in Washington would never do. That's why we're making progress in New York, and there's gridlock down in Washington where Congresswoman Hayworth and the Tea Party have been in control. Now, she talks about productive dollars, but you voted against the payroll tax cut for middle-class families 6 times, and they put you on the conference committee to make sure it wouldn't get done. And the fact of the matter is the only tax cuts the Tea Party likes are for multimillionaires, and they want to blow a $5 trillion hole in the budget deficit to give huge new tax cuts to multimillionaires while ending the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. That's just wrong.
Congresswoman, response to that?
Mr. Maloney, you don't know the Hudson Valley and you don't know the facts in this case. I was put on the conference committee to work with Republicans and Democrats, the Democratic leadership from the Senate, the Republican leadership from the House, of which I was a representative, to assure that we could extend the payroll tax holiday, which is exactly what we did for the entire year of 2012. We also assured that Medicare would be secure through 2012 by making sure that the reimbursements for the care that our seniors rely on would stay steady throughout this year. We're trying to preserve Medicare for our seniors. That's the whole goal of our plan in the House of Representatives. Preserve and protect Medicare and help our middle class and our working families. That's why we extended the payroll tax holiday. And Sean, you have it exactly opposite.
Mr. Maloney, you have said repeatedly throughout the campaign and in this debate this evening that your opponent is part of the Tea Party. But isn't using labels like Tea Party only contributing to some of the partisan rancor that we see in politics today? And if elected, how do you plan to work across the aisle?
Well, the Tea Party is what they call themselves, and Congresswoman Hayworth was proud to have the Tea Party support when she ran 2 years ago, and she said she was proud to be a radical. She also said the government should stop trying to create jobs. Today, she wants to tell you that that's not her, that's something else. Look, we know what the record is, and you don't have to take my word for it. The fact of the matter is she went down to Washington, and her #1 priority was to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. When she says preserve and protect Medicare, she means to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. That's Tea Party speak. You have to pay close attention to what they say. She also wants to kill Planned Parenthood and take away good health care, the only source of health care for thousands of Hudson Valley families. So I don't know what you mean when you say I don't know the Hudson Valley. I think if you knew the Hudson Valley, you would see the faces of those 31,000 families who won't get good health care because you and your Tea Party friends are going to kill Planned Parenthood. Those are the wrong priorities. And I'm proud to say I'm a Bill Clinton Democrat, and we can do a lot better.
Okay, but the question was working across the aisle. How do you plan on possibly bringing people together in Washington over these certainly last several years? We haven't seen that.
Well, let me tell you, I've spent a long part of my career working across the aisle. I'm very proud of my service in state government, where I helped draft the marriage equality law in New York State. And I specifically drafted provisions of that law, working with the governor's team, to appeal to Republicans in the state Senate, because we knew that we could never create full marriage equality in New York without Democrats and Republicans coming together. That's a good example of bipartisanship. My opponent won't support marriage equality in New York, and she won't say what her position is. She'll say the states can decide it, but I think she owes it to you to tell you whether she supports marriage equality for all families. I worked across the aisle to create it in New York.
Congresswoman, go ahead. Bipartisanship. How can that be achieved in Washington?
Well, it starts with not labeling your opponent in a race as something that she clearly is not. Sean, you can try to demonize me, but it doesn't give you a halo. One of your key roles in the Spitzer administration was to help your colleagues hide the facts in Troopergate, and you're trying to hide and distort the facts now. The fact of the matter is that I am one of the key Republicans in the House working across the aisle. I'm a co-founder of the Common Ground Caucus, which is bringing Democrats and Republicans together to work on legislation in a way that brings us into universal agreement, which is what we need to have. We need to have consensus. We need to have cooperation. I am a co-chair of the Hurricane Irene Caucus. Democrats and Republicans working together to provide relief after those devastating storms, which is how we brought $90 million into our district for road and bridge repair.
If you could also just respond to Mr. Maloney's statement on the marriage equality, same-sex marriage issue. Is that something that you would ever consider supporting one day?
I certainly respect the fact that the state of New York, states all have the right to establish their definition of marriage, and I certainly respect the fact that in the state of New York, marriage equality is now the law, and I respect and support that.
And Mr. Maloney, the Spitzer and Troopergate issue as well that the Congresswoman mentioned in her answer, if you could respond to that as well.
Right. Well, I'd just like to note, and I'll answer your question, but I think I just heard the Congresswoman say that she supports marriage equality in New York. If so, that's the first time she's ever said that, and I certainly welcome her to the equality team in that regard. In terms of Troopergate, look, I went to Albany to work on education and infrastructure issues. I was a senior policy advisor to the governor, and the fact of the matter is I had nothing to do with Troopergate. That's why they asked me to look into it. That's what you do. You ask the person who has no connection to it to find out what the facts are. That's what I did.
Okay, so this race and at this point has become pretty negative. We've already heard a lot of the allegations here with the labels of Tea Party extremism, obviously, and also carpetbagging, although that specific word hasn't come up, but on several occasions this allegation of where you live, Mr. Maloney, has come up. So at this point, we want to give you the opportunity to directly respond to these claims. So Congresswoman, we'll start with you. Regarding the fact of your Tea Partyism, quote unquote. I mean, you did run with the support of the Tea Party or of the conservatives, however you like to call them, the grassroots movement in 2010. What is your response to that now? I had Tea Party support in 2010, and I was proud to have the support of people who cherish the constitutionally defined role of the federal government. It's very important to have a federal government that respects our states. That's why I made the comment I did about the states' right to define marriage. That is something that we respect, and I support all of those constitutional provisions that protect individual citizens, that protect the states. Certainly, I differed with many of the Tea Party members on some issues like environmental protections. I have been someone who has supported the actions of the EPA in preserving the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. I received certainly some challenges about that from Tea Party supporters, but we had so much in common in wanting to grow our economy from the ground up, which is where it needs to be, by having a federal government that doesn't crush us with tax and regulatory burdens, that I was certainly delighted to have their support, and that of an entire spectrum of folks across the Hudson Valley. I'm here for everyone in the Hudson Valley. Okay, so just to be clear, you at this point consider yourself a centrist? Is that what you're saying?
I have always been someone who has been able to reach consensus, reach across the aisle, work cooperatively with others, and my record demonstrates that. I ran in that way. I ran as someone who presented her positions honestly, regardless of audience, and I'm very proud of that set of positions and that record. I have a real record. Mr. Maloney is a broken record, and he is completely off on these facts, as anybody who would care to examine them would know.
Okay, before you respond directly to that allegation, I just do want to clear up this issue about your where you live, your residence.
Sure.
I mean, I know you've been a longtime resident of New York City. You had a second home in Sullivan County where you had been there for some time. At this point, are you living in the district with your family? And regardless of whether you win or lose, are you planning to make that move permanently?
Well, I live in Cold Spring. I don't have to make any plans. I pay taxes there. I vote there. That's my home. And you're right, Liz. My partner and I have lived for 16 years part-time in Sullivan County. He built his whole business up there, building green-friendly modular homes, a lot of which are built right in Port Jervis. Look, we've got long-standing connections to this community. And the voters nominated me in June to have this debate with Congresswoman Hayworth. So let's have it. Let's have a debate about the future. And she can run from her Tea Party record, but facts are stubborn things. And the fact of the matter is, she's voted with the Tea Party every step along the way. And when she had the choice to stand with Hudson Valley families or the Tea Party, she voted to defund Medicare and defund Planned Parenthood and to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. Those are Tea Party priorities. And if you ask me, Tea Party is as Tea Party does.
Congresswoman, you want to take 30 seconds for that?
I'm a doctor. I practiced for 16 years in the Hudson Valley, cared for patients, thousands of whom were seniors relying on Medicare. I have two elderly parents who too have relied on Medicare. The last thing I would ever do would be to try to harm their safe and secure Medicare benefits. I have fought for their Medicare benefits. I have fought to preserve Medicare not only for them, but for generations to come, which is why we need to ask Mr. Maloney why he supports a law that takes $716 billion out of Medicare. If anything jeopardizes the future of Medicare, profoundly, it is that law.
Can I respond to that, Nick? I mean, that's not true. I don't support the $700 billion cut to Medicare. She can say that. I've heard her say it before. It's not true. There's not a shred of evidence for that because I'm not in Congress. And the fact of the matter is there's only one person on this stage who's voted twice to cut $700 billion out of Medicare. It was in both Ryan budgets, Congresswoman. You voted for both of them. And worse, you have voted repeatedly to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. And you say it's premium support and you say you want to preserve the program. It's a voucher program, and it will cost seniors $6,400 more every single year. It'll destroy the promise of Medicare. You're breaking that promise, and you should just admit your record and defend it.
Okay, well, I'm glad that we brought up Medicare because that's actually our next topic, believe it or not. And the question's for Mr. Maloney. You know, there is a lot of talk about preserving Medicare for future generations. How would you reshape and overhaul Medicare so that future generations are ensured that it can have it, that it will be there? And please, if you can, be very specific on this point.
Yeah, look, I mean, here's the fact of the matter is, the Congresswoman wants to take $5 trillion and give it to multimillionaires like herself in a huge new tax cut. If you applied just a fraction of that money to the Medicare Trust Fund, you'd extend the life of the trust fund for years and years into the future. The fact of the matter is this is about choices. These guys talk about a debt crisis and they talk about balance in the budget in the Tea Party. We did it. We did it in the Clinton administration. We were running record surpluses when Bill Clinton left office. And if we had left Bill Clinton's policies in place, the national debt today would be zero. And we would have hit zero a year ago. We would have a debt-free country, and we wouldn't be talking about ending Medicare. So the Congresswoman and the Tea Party have been making the wrong choices. And now, to give themselves huge $5 trillion tax cuts and to defund Planned Parenthood, to give themselves these huge tax cuts, they would defund Planned Parenthood, and they'll end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. Those are the facts, and people need to know the facts.
So, to be clear, should taxes be raised to help pay for Medicare? I mean, how are we going to fill this? How are we going to fill this budget for this program?
Here's what I support. What I support is a comprehensive plan to get serious about the federal debt. We've done this before. If you look what we did in the Clinton administration, we asked the very wealthy to pay just a little more. And Republicans and Tea Partiers, like my opponent, said the sky was going to fall. It was going to destroy the economy, kill job creators. And what happened? We created 20 million new jobs, 800,000 jobs right here in New York. And we balanced the budget. We were paying down the national debt. Those are the right choices. And if you give me a chance, that's what we're going to do again.
Congresswoman, please respond.
Well, Sean, certainly I can tell now when you're distorting the facts because your lips are moving. It's just simply untrue that we are trying to give any sort of $5 trillion tax break to anyone. We need to grow revenues for our future by growing our economy. We need to make Medicare safe and secure for the future by putting back the $716 billion that was taken out of Medicare by the massive 2010 health law. The reason it's said that we voted for it, we did not, but it is in the current budget baseline, and that's just a fundamental fact that we have already said, and Governor Romney has made it clear, those dollars will flow back into Medicare. They have to go back into the trust fund. It is deceptive and dishonest to say anything else. That law needs to be repealed and replaced, and we need to have a plan for economic growth, make taxes flatter and fairer, reduce regulatory burdens, reduce energy prices, and then we will be able to sustain all those vital programs and balance the budget for the future.
Well, and to be fair, that $700 million is actually, or $700 billion, I should say, is coming out over a decade. How are we looking, though, for future generations, 20, 30, 40 years down the road for Medicare? What's the long-term plan for this program specifically that you think needs to be done?
Well, Medicare is a vital program on which seniors depend. It's entirely true. We need to have an approach to Medicare that will make sure that seniors who now rely on those benefits and have planned their lives around them will have those benefits, which is why I was on the conference committee to assure that those benefits would be there for seniors at least through this year. And I will continue to fight every year for as many years as is needed to make sure of that. We need to make Medicare sound for the future by shoring up the trust fund, and the way to do that is by putting Americans back to work. We have 23 million Americans who are unemployed or underemployed, thanks to the policies of the past 4 years, policies which Sean Maloney supports. We need to put those Americans back to work by bringing business back into the United States. Make it easy to grow a business here in the Hudson Valley. I hear it from small businesses all over the Hudson Valley. They're ready to grow, they're eager to grow, but they know that they are facing crushing burdens going forward, starting in January 2013. We need an entirely new approach.
Okay, and Mr. Maloney, and we are running past the red light, so if we can keep our answers concise, brevity is the soul of wit. But please go ahead.
Well, look, you know, the Congresswoman doesn't have a problem with me. She has a problem with her own record, and her rhetoric doesn't match her record. The fact of the matter is the Ryan budget, which you voted for, Congresswoman, not once but twice, creates $5 trillion in new tax cuts to the very wealthiest in our country, who already got them, who don't need them. And it does end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. This is real simple. They want to replace Medicare with a capped benefit. It's a voucher, and they're going to give it to you, and good luck out in the private market with private insurers. And they say it's going to save money, and you know what? If they cap your benefits and make you pay $6,400 more every single year, well, they could probably save some money, and that money's going right up to those multimillionaires like my opponent who already got tax cuts and who are giving themselves new ones. These are the wrong choices, and we can do so much better if we work together, if we do what works. That's what we did in the 90s when we balanced the budget the right way, and that's a roadmap for the future that with your help we can follow again. Okay,
I see the Congresswoman shaking her head. You will have a chance, it's coming up in just a few moments, to ask one another a question. That's what we're going to have you do at this point. So I think that we're going to have Mr. Maloney go first. We'll have you ask a question of the Congresswoman and she will respond, and then we'll switch things around.
Well, great. Well, Congresswoman, under your tax and budget plan, Mitt Romney would pay less than 1% in taxes. Why is that fair?
Sean, the premise of your question is not valid. That simply isn't true. All we are proposing.
Congresswoman, yes, it is, because you would eliminate the capital gains tax, and Mitt Romney's income is largely in capital gains. It's a huge income, but it's all capital gains, and independent estimates have said he would have paid. He released his tax returns. His effective tax rate under your budget plan that you voted for would be less than 1%. Why is that fair?
Sean, let me ask you a question. What happened to the capital gains tax under President Clinton?
Is your point that 1% is fair
Simple
for
question.
Mitt Romney?
Simple question.
If you mean it was lowered, is that your point? Well, that's fine, but we also balanced the budget, and we created 20 million new jobs, and we didn't do it by giving tax cuts to multimillionaires like you and Mitt Romney.
Who benefits from a capital gains tax reduction?
Look, I think
Simple
investors
question,
clearly
Sean.
benefit, and the rich benefit most from it, because if you're a teacher or a firefighter and you're out there buying groceries and making a regular income and getting a paycheck, you don't have a lot of capital gains. But if you're a multimillionaire and an investor, then most of your income comes in capital gains. And Congresswoman Hayworth wants to eliminate all taxes on capital gains,
Sean,
which means Mitt Romney and you would pay much, much less in taxes.
What do police officers, firefighters, and teachers depend on for their retirement years? What are they called?
Well, I think it would be Medicare that you want to end
It'd be
and
called
replace with
pension plans.
kill the guaranteed benefit.
It'd be called pension plans, Sean. And in fact, pension plans invest. So when you talk about the benefits of yes, we should have an approach that looks at the capital gains tax. There's no question about it. But the idea is not to give some sort of outsized benefits to multimillionaires. The idea is to benefit investment and growth here in the United States. We've done that in the House of Representatives. That's why we passed the Jobs Act, Democrats and Republicans alike. And what we did was reduce the burdens on small companies that want to gain investment. That helps investors. That helps the small companies. It's called the Jobs Act, Sean. The president himself signed it into law in March.
Yeah,
and
it was a shadow of what we could have done. We could have created millions of jobs, but that Jobs Act you're talking about helped a few people go do initial public offerings a little easier, so that's good, but it didn't really fix the problem.
Okay,
and if I could just finish, I hear the Congresswoman talking
last
about
word,
jobs.
Sean.
Here, Liz, thank you. The fact of the matter is she's been voting to give big tax breaks to companies that ship our jobs overseas. You keep voting for that. That's a terrible idea.
The biggest outsourcer in the world is the
Okay.
United States government, Sean, because our taxes on business are the highest in the world.
Okay,
You support that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now?
It was a very good exchange. However, I do want to offer the Congresswoman an opportunity to ask a question to Mr. Maloney. I think that's where we were.
Yes.
Right, okay. Go ahead.
Sean, when is the last time you paid taxes on your home in Putnam County?
Right, well,
Property taxes.
I'm paying them this year, and they're too high.
When is the last time you paid them?
I'm paying them right now.
Oh, today?
Yeah, I'm paying them right now. I mean, they're due right now. I owe my property taxes, and I owe all the other taxes of any other resident. Look, Congresswoman, I understand that they're obsessed with this where you live thing.
It has to do with character and honesty, Sean.
It has to do with character and honesty. That's an excellent point. And I think character and honesty is admitting when you want to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare, when you want to defund Planned Parenthood. You haven't even mentioned that.
Character and honesty starts with a basic of where do you live?
Yes, I live in Cold Spring. And I've lived in...
When are property taxes due in Cold Spring?
If your point is that I should have paid them sooner, I don't know.
You ought to know, Sean. You have a home there.
Yeah, look, I'll pay all my taxes. I always have, Congresswoman. Thank you very much. And I may not be in your league, and I know you've had a lot of fun in this campaign making fun of, where I live in my home. And
Sean, this is not
people
fun.
If I could finish, ma'am, I didn't interrupt you. The fact of the matter is, the Congresswoman wants to talk about where I live because she can't talk about what's important to you. She can't talk about why she wants to end Medicare and defund Planned Parenthood. So she's going to call me names. This is a Tea Party trick, right? It's you hurl insults, you get real mad, and you hope everybody forgets what you've been doing down in Washington. And the fact of the matter is that I pay taxes right here in the Hudson Valley because I've just moved here, but I've lived in Sullivan County for 16 years, and I pay taxes there every single year, Congresswoman. You can go look it up. Every single year. And folks, those taxes are too high.
Sean,
and what we need to do...
Sullivan County is not in the district.
Okay, just to interrupt here before we devolve completely. If you would like to respond, Congresswoman, directly to the allegations regarding insults being hurled, et cetera, because you don't want to speak about other issues, please do, but then we'd like to move on.
Well, insults are not the issue here at all. We have a hugely important decision to make. Whom do you trust to represent the Hudson Valley? Someone who can honestly tell you, I have lived here for 24 years, I have worked here, I have raised 2 children here, I have established a practice here, grown it, my own small business, taking care of thousands of patients right here in the Hudson Valley. I have got to know every town and village and city in our Hudson Valley, and I take those responsibilities very seriously. and I can tell you truthfully that I am here to represent every single one of you.
Okay, so we'd like to turn the attention at this point to a topic that is very important to the entire Hudson Valley, and I know no longer directly in the district, but as I'm sure you're both aware, the NRC today is starting a series of hearings on Indian Point, on the future of Indian Point and the desire of Entergy to extend the licenses. So we're going to switch it up here. This question will go to you. Mr. Maloney, you've said that you would like to see Indian Point shut down as soon as possible, correct?
Yes, that's right.
You have. And you've also said you'd like to see a fracking ban in the Hudson Valley.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So my first question is, would you consider the fracking ban entirely for the state? And if not, do you consider fracking a possibility to replace the 2,000 and change megawatts that Indian Point is currently generating? And if no fracking at all, how would you replace that energy?
Right. This is a very important difference between the Congresswoman and I. You know, Congresswoman Hayworth is the #1 recipient in the Republican Party of money from the people who own Indian Point. She's #1, takes more money from Entergy than anybody else. So it's little wonder that she wants to keep it going forever, and she discounts as a remote possibility the threat of a serious accident there, which would have catastrophic effects on the Hudson Valley. I support responsibly closing Indian Point, making sure the communities surrounding it and the workers there are transitioned to new work. In fact, we can create jobs by the process of closing the plant. We've seen that elsewhere in the country. And we can replace the power from Indian Point by renewable energy, like the project she won't support in Orange County at Taylor Biomass, by better use of wind and solar and renewables, programs that benefit from federal programs that she opposes. And we can do better on conservation. Riverkeeper just came out with a study that says we can replace the power at Indian Point with renewable energy. My opponent wants to keep Indian Point going forever, and she supports fracking in the Hudson Valley and elsewhere, which is a terrible idea. And she takes $56,000 in just the last year from all the dirty energy companies, from big oil, from the worst frackers like Chesapeake Energy, like Halliburton, like the Koch brothers. These are her contributors. So it's little wonder that she wants to do fracking in the Hudson Valley and keep Indian Point going forever. I think it's time for a new generation in clean power.
So to be clear, the fracking ban that you would support is statewide, not just in the Hudson Valley, but you wouldn't like to see it anywhere in New York?
I'd rather not see it done anywhere, but I don't think we should ever do it in the Hudson Valley. I think it's wrong for the Hudson Valley. My opponent supports fracking on military lands and on national park land, which means that in the National Wildlife, the bird sanctuary in Warwick, in the Wallkill River, she could do it there. You could do it on the military lands at West Point. I think this is a terrible idea. We should not do fracking in the Hudson Valley. My opponent supports it. I think it's wrong.
Congresswoman?
Well, one of the key points that folks who are listening in the Hudson Valley should take away from this debate is that Sean Patrick Maloney wants to raise your energy prices tremendously, because Indian Point happens to be a very important source of local power, anywhere from 18 to 30+% of base load. If we endeavor to close down Indian Point and replace it with something else, it will cost the residents of the Hudson Valley tremendously. It is not a simple matter. It's not an easy fix. And the most likely thing would be natural gas. That too would be very hard and very costly, and natural gas would pollute in ways that the current Indian Point steam generator does not. Fracking in New York State, I commend Governor Cuomo for his very careful approach. It has to be safe, it has to be clean, and we have to respect home rule. I do not anticipate that there will be hydrofracking in the Hudson Valley, and I would not violate home rule for our communities here.
Just to be clear, in terms of the safety of Indian Point, you do believe that the plant is safe. I know that you're on record as saying that an evacuation would be challenging at many people.
Liz, to try to evacuate the New York metropolitan region for any cause, a natural disaster, an act of terror, would be extremely difficult. When we think about Indian Point, obviously, safety comes first. The plant has to be very safely operated, and incidentally, I have always supported the continued operation of Indian Point, from obviously safely and securely, from years before, from the time I moved into the Hudson Valley. It has nothing to do with anything but my support of clean, inexpensive energy for the Hudson Valley. The risk of a disaster of the magnitude that would require evacuation at Indian Point is vanishingly small. That has to remain so, which is why we have to make sure that the NRC is doing everything it can to monitor the plant and that every safety precaution is followed.
Well, I think the risk of Indian Point vanished about the time Congresswoman Hayworth cashed the checks from the people who run it. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we've seen recently at Fukushima and elsewhere that the consequences of a nuclear accident are catastrophic. And everyone agrees that Indian Point would never be built today, where it is today. No one would ever put a nuclear power station that close to New York City. So the responsible thing to do is to stop downplaying the risks, but to get a plan for responsibly moving away from it, taking care of the communities that surround it, whose economies depend on it, and the workers who work there. We can do this, but we have to invest in renewable power, something the Tea Party and my opponent keep opposing every step of the way.
Okay, next question is for Congresswoman Hayworth. This area was hit pretty hard by a few storms in the last couple of years. What would you say the role is of the federal government in providing disaster assistance to homes, property owners, businesses who need it?
The federal government has a very important role to play in that regard through FEMA, obviously, and in fact, when those storms hit, I was the first member of the New York Congressional delegation to to ask President Obama to grant full disaster designation, both for public assistance and for individual assistance to all of our constituent counties, and that was achieved. I am a co-chair, as mentioned before, with Peter Welch, my colleague, a Democrat from Vermont and a good friend. I'm a co-chair of the Hurricane Irene Coalition, which brought members of Congress from all of those devastated communities and districts together so that we could achieve effective advocacy for full relief for all of our communities. I was on the ground the night of the storm here in the Hudson Valley, Sean, when you were in Manhattan, I presume. You were not here. I was on the ground. I was on the ground the next day viewing the damage in Mount Kisco. I was on the ground the next day viewing the Forge Hill Road Bridge with George Green, that very dedicated town supervisor. We were there again in August to call for its reconstruction to be achieved immediately. And in fact, Senator Schumer just recently joined in to a bipartisan effort, and we're going to get that bridge repaired even faster. This is the kind of service we have to do here in the Hudson Valley, and when you understand our communities, you can do that.
Well, I'm so glad this issue was raised, because if it's just a case study in my opponent's Tea Party view of government. The fact of the matter is that if you talk to the farmers in Orange County, I'll tell you where I was, Congressman. I was over there on the one-year anniversary talking to Chris Pavelski, a fourth-generation onion farmer, talking to Jeff and Adina Bialis, who grow specialty crops, and they watched the water come up over their crops a year ago and their livelihood destroyed. And they turned on their TV and they saw you, Congresswoman Hayworth, standing with Eric Cantor, calling for budget cuts before we would fund FEMA. Look, I worked in the West Wing of the White House. My office handled the disaster declarations for the president. With all due respect, Congresswoman, signing on to a disaster declaration is something every member of the New York delegation would have done, and it's the most routine thing anyone can do. The actual work involves getting help to the people who need it. And Chris Pavelski and the other farmers out there told the Times-Herald-Record that you, quote, let them drown in the mud. You abandoned them in a hurricane because your Tea Party priorities of cutting the budget took priority for you, and that's wrong.
Congresswoman, we have to have you respond to that.
Thank you, yes. Well, Chris is a well-known activist. I have tried to work with Chris, believe me. We have an agricultural advisory committee. I meet with our farmers regularly. I, in fact, have just been made a friend of the Farm Bureau by the New York State Farm Bureau in recognition of the work that I have done in behalf of our agricultural community. I've been an advocate for them all along, and I was with Ron Myrusky and Paul Ruskevich when we were looking at the devastation. I was there looking at the lands that were underwater. Believe me, I have been an advocate for them from the start, and it had nothing to do with budgets. I voted for every one of our FEMA appropriations down the line. It was not a matter of budget. That was the priority.
We're getting up to our time limit here, and there are a couple of topics that I know that are important. So again, to you, Mr. Maloney, I'd like to talk about foreign policy just briefly. How, if at all, would you like to see the Obama administration, if in fact they're returned to the White House, change its approach, particularly when it comes to Israel and Iran?
Well, look, we need to take very seriously the threat to Israel from the Iranian nuclear program. When I was in the White House, I handled all the national security information that went to the President of the United States. I held a top secret code word national security clearance. I'm proud that this president eliminated the threat of Osama bin Laden. I'm proud that we've used drones and special forces and electronic intelligence to eliminate the leadership of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. I think the Iranian threat, however, is one that is so serious that we need to do everything possible to stop the Iranians, and we need to say clearly that the Iranians will not obtain a nuclear weapon. But I don't want to rush to war either. We've seen the consequences of that. And we have good evidence that the sanctions against Iran are working. The president and his team have put in place the toughest sanctions in history. And we've seen the Iranian currency devalued and dropping. We have a regime change approaching in Iran, and I think we need to keep at it. But the Israelis need to know that we will stand with them every step of the way, and that if necessary, we will keep all options on the table to make sure that they're safe in their homes. And if I think about this as if my own kids went to sleep in Tel Aviv, we need to take this threat very, very seriously. The Iranians must not be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon.
So in short, though, you're satisfied with the direction in which the Obama administration is going at this point?
I'm satisfied that we're not rushing to war. I think we've seen a lot of loose talk from the Republican ticket about rushing into another war. We've spent $800 billion in Iraq. We've spent $600 billion in Afghanistan. My opponent said we shouldn't have a deadline to get out of Afghanistan. I think it's good we're getting our kids home, and I think we can use smarter, cheaper, better ways to attack and to capture or kill every last person who attacked us on 9/11 and anybody who's thinking about doing it in the future. But my opponent wants to just keep going in places like Afghanistan. I think that's a terrible mistake.
Congresswoman?
Well, in fact, I'm on public record as saying that I think we should be out of Afghanistan. I have had the sorrowful experience of attending two funerals.
2 years ago, ma'am. You said we should not have a deadline.
It's 2012, not 2010, Sean. I've attended 2 funerals this past summer of majors whose lives were lost. They're both from Orange County, both had West Point graduates, both of them. And when you attend a funeral like that, you recognize that what our troops are facing now in Afghanistan, and it has become clear during the past 2 years that our investment in Afghanistan in terms of putting troops at risk is no longer bearing the kind of fruit that we would have to have. There is just too much at stake. So we need to devote those resources instead toward enhancing our intelligence, enhancing particularly in places like Libya. We have a treacherous world. It is very difficult, and I acknowledge that, to manage foreign policy, and the President has done certain things well, there's no question, and I commend him for killing bin Laden. But it goes again to one more question, which is that we have to have the strongest economy in the world. If we're going to have the best defense in the world, which we need, we have to have the strongest economy. And if we keep going with policies that Mr. Maloney supports, we will have a weak economy, and that will put us at desperate risk, as Admiral Mullen himself said when he was referring to our security threats.
Okay, next question is for Congresswoman Hayworth, and it's about super PACs. This race has seen a flood of outside money on both sides running ads on behalf of both candidates. This comes in part after the Citizens United ruling that allows for these so-called super PAC committees. Should the funding of these groups be disclosed? And even though your campaigns cannot coordinate with these groups, do you feel as if you bear any responsibility for what some of these committees might be saying on your behalf?
I'm responsible for my service to the Hudson Valley, and my priority is to be with the people I serve, and that's what I spend my time doing. And folks who have followed me around the district, I was at Latinos Unidos on Saturday night, as I mentioned, and a very nice lady came up to me and said, "My gosh, Nan, you are everywhere." And she wanted to come up and thank me for doing that. I am here to listen to and represent the concerns of our constituents. I am not here to be influenced by any PAC of one sort or another. And I trust the intelligence of the people who are watching these ads to know the difference between what's just name-calling and invective, of which we have certain examples here today, versus actual factual representations. And I commend the folks who are watching this debate today, because this is a great way for people to get the real information that they need. These millions that go into ads, I think it's ridiculous. Those millions ought to be flowing into the real economy. And we would actually have a lot more of that happen if we had a far simpler tax and regulatory structure, because so many of these dollars are going to these causes because they want to influence those things.
But
and it's wrong.
Should the funding of these groups be disclosed, though? Should the donors be subject to some sort of disclosure?
I respect the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United was based on First Amendment principles. And I respect that decision. And believe me, it has certainly, the super PAC activity has been quite notable against my campaign, as far as I understand it from the press accounts and from hearing. I actually don't get to watch these things, but hearing about some of these ads. Mr. Soros seems to have a particular problem with my being in office, and you know, I'm sorry for that, but the people of the Hudson Valley get to decide these matters, not Mr. Soros.
Mr. Maloney, same questions, and if you could respond too.
Yeah, I don't know what any of that meant. That was a lot of gobbledygook. But if you're trying to follow this at home, I think the fact of the matter is that the Congresswoman supports the worst Supreme Court decision of the last 20 years. The fact of the matter is that Citizens United opened the floodgate for huge amounts of money to come washing around in politics. Now, maybe if you're like my opponent, and you receive tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars from every special interest in Washington. You know, she received $800,000 from the healthcare industry. So is it any wonder that she's doing their bidding in Washington? I just mentioned earlier that she received $56,000 from the people who want to do fracking in the Hudson Valley, from the owners of Indian Point. Is it any wonder that she supports their positions? Look, we need disclosure. She won't support it, I will. And I think we ought to limit the amount of money in politics. I think money's killing our politics. I think ordinary middle-class people ought to get up and offer their service, and they shouldn't have to be multimillionaires, all due respect, Congresswoman, to do that. I think that we ought to have citizen-funded campaigns, and we ought to get the super PACs the heck out of our politics so we can talk about ideas. And my ideas are supporting working and middle-class families, and not my opponent's ideas, which are giving huge tax cuts to multimillionaires and trying to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. That's what you'd be able to decide if you didn't have these huge shadowy groups flooding your mailbox and your TVs with ads.
So you support public financing of campaigns?
I support citizen-funded campaigns, you bet.
And how do you pay for that?
Well, I think there's citizen-funded campaigns. The fact of the matter is I think working and middle-class people ought to have a voice in their government. And what's going on, folks, is you may have noticed your government is broken. This Tea Party crowd in Washington has ground everything to a halt, and they'd rather fight and call people names. My opponent seems to think it's invective when I invoke her record. The fact of the matter is she's accountable for that record. And I would absolutely get the money out of politics. I think it's killing us.
Just to be clear, we've heard a lot here regarding who has more money. So I'm just curious, what's the threshold in your mind, Mr. Maloney, for rich? I mean, what is it when you keep calling the Congresswoman a multimillionaire? I'm just curious what that means.
Well, listen, I've been very fortunate in my career, and I've done very well, and I'm very grateful for that. Now, I'm not in my opponent's category. She's one of the richest members of Congress. But look, here's the point. There's no problem with the fact that she and her husband have done very, very well, you know, making money off of people's health care. That's America. Look, here's the point. The point is who are you fighting for, right? I want people like me to pay a little more in taxes so that we can keep Medicare working for our seniors. I want people like me to sacrifice a little bit when we're, like she wants to do, cutting veterans benefits, cutting Pell Grants.
We're going to have to hold you to the time constraint on that one. And Congresswoman, if you could respond to all of that, the charge of gobbledygook.
I've made my position clear, Sean. Citizens United was the right constitutional decision by the Supreme Court. And the consequences of that decision have to do entirely with the fact that we have a federal government that reaches too far into our lives and too far into our pockets, and it doesn't matter whether you are at one end of the spectrum or the other. The economic ladder has been broken in the past 4 years. I want to rebuild it so that everyone can have the dignity of having a job, of being able to support their communities, of being able to support their families. I hear it from families throughout this district. They have lost members to other states who wanted to stay here, but the cost of living is just too high. They don't have the jobs they should. They can't find the opportunities they should. Young people under the age of 30 are finding it very difficult. People can't get mortgages because credit is so hard to come by now. These are profound problems in the Hudson Valley that I know because I've lived here and worked here and raised a family here.
Pardon me, I'm sorry to cut you off. We are running out of time. We're going to move to this point in the debate, which we call the lightning round. This is where we ask the candidates a series of questions where we would like them to just respond with yes or no answers, please. And we're going to start with Mr. Maloney. So, is someone who makes more than $250,000 rich?
They're the wealthiest 1%.
Yes or no? Yes. Have you ever voted for a member of the opposite party?
No.
Congresswoman.
Congresswoman, have you ever worked a minimum wage job?
I worked a less than minimum wage job.
So yes.
Yes.
Mr. Maloney, have you ever worked a minimum wage job?
Yes, of course, and I've waited tables where you don't make the minimum wage, and my opponent didn't even know what the minimum wage was. I think she thought it was $11 an hour.
Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no?
So I can't, I'm not sure.
Okay, so the format is confusing to me here, so forgive me. Congresswoman, I have to re-ask you these two questions that I did pose to Mr. Maloney, but not to you. So, is someone who makes more than $250,000 rich, in your
Not in the
opinion?
Hudson Valley.
No. Have you ever voted for a member of the opposite party?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Maloney, have
Reaching
you ever
across the aisle, Sean.
have you ever ridden the Metro
Was
North?
it Bill Clinton, Congresswoman?
Yes or
Secret
no?
ballot, Sean.
Yes or no? Have you ever ridden on Metro
There's still a
North?
chance this year.
Mr. Maloney.
Yes, well, yes, Liz.
Metro
I'm sorry.
North, have you ever ridden on it?
Of course.
Congresswoman?
I commuted on it.
Mr.
Still
Maloney,
take it today regularly.
So yes. Have you ever voted for an American Idol contestant?
No.
Congresswoman?
Good sense, sir. No.
Mr. Maloney, have you ever hiked Bear Mountain?
Yes.
Congressman?
No.
Mr. Maloney, have you ever bounced a check?
Yes.
Congresswoman?
I don't think so, no.
Yes or no?
Not in recent memory.
Okay. Moving on. Mr. Maloney, is Governor Andrew Cuomo the best governor the state has had in the past 20 years?
Yes, I think he is.
He's an excellent governor.
Is he the best, though, in the last 20 years?
Well, I would say that he and Governor Pataki both had outstanding records.
Yes? No?
It's the premise of the question I would disagree with.
Okay, so that concludes our debate. We'd like to thank Marist College for, oh, I'm sorry, good Lord. And I'm going to cut off both of you. No closing
No.
statements, forget it. This is
We thought we were
totally
leaving.
my fault, forgive me. Actually,
yet.
we are going to have closing statements, and we'll start with, now that you're all off your game. We'll start with you, Mr. Maloney.
Thank you. Well,
Sorry.
listen, thank you again, Marist College. Thank you, YNN. I want to thank Congresswoman Hayworth for sharing the stage with me, and I want to salute her public service. I really mean that. It takes a lot to put yourself forward in public service. But here's the choice, folks. I'm a Bill Clinton Democrat who's created jobs in the private sector. I grew a business, created hundreds of jobs right here in New York. My opponent is a Tea Party extremist, and when given the choice to vote with our Hudson Valley families or the Tea Party, she's chosen the Tea Party every step of the way. What do I mean? I mean she voted to break the promise of Medicare. She voted to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. She voted to defund Planned Parenthood. I've said that many times tonight because I feel very strongly about it. That would deprive tens of thousands of Hudson Valley families of quality health care. The only place they're going to get it, she would take it away. And why? To give huge new tax cuts to multimillionaires like herself. Those are the wrong choices. If you give me your voice and your vote in Washington, I'll work every day for working and middle-class families, and we can finally turn the page on the Tea Party. Thank you so much.
Congresswoman.
Well, thank you, Sean, for sharing the stage with me and for running. I know it takes a lot of courage. And to Nick and Liz and YNN and, of course, Marist College, thank you. Sean, your plan for our future is boiled down very simply. Increase taxes, increase regulations, increase government spending, and increase energy prices. Those are 4 areas in which I could not be more different from you, Sean, having lived and worked and raised a family here in the Hudson Valley, having listened to folks in every community here. The mom who told me last week that it's $75 to fill her tank of gas, which means she, because her husband, also in this economy, doesn't have the electrician work that he should have, she's going to have to cut down on her children's activities. These are the people whose stories I take to heart. They need to have relief. They need to have jobs. We need a climate and an environment that will support our small businesses, the ones who tell me, Nan, if we could just get a break, we could grow, we could hire, and this is what we need. Fairer taxes, lower taxes. We need relief from regulatory burdens. We need to preserve and protect Medicare and Social Security for the future by putting our workforce back to work and making sure those benefits are secure. And we need to lower the energy prices for the people who suffer so with property taxes here in the Hudson Valley. Thank you for letting me serve you here in the Hudson Valley, and I hope to have the honor of serving you for 2 more years come November.
Okay. And that concludes our debate. We'd like to thank Marist College for hosting the event. We'd like to thank the candidates for participating.
And Election Day is November 6th. We hope you vote, and we hope this helped you make your decision in voting. If you want to watch the debate again, you can go by going to our YNN On Demand channel. That's channel 1110 in the Hudson Valley.
And from all of us here at YNN, have a great night and be well.